All right, everybody, welcome back for take 2 with Rosie Rosenberger, the founder of Process Triage. Rosie, great to have you back. We've already had a great 10-minute conversation here this morning.
As always.
Listen, we were chatting a little bit before the show about, for anybody that doesn't know, we purchased Process Triage from Rosie back in January of this year, and we've been scaling that up, growing that organization underneath the Process Fixer and incorporating the work together. Because when I first met you, Rosie, I saw the light, right? I had been doing process work for 20 years.
Right.
I had been sending out $100,000 invoices and SOPs to do discovery for years and years. And some people were shocked and like, wow, that's a lot of money to do discovery. And I'm like, yeah, because I got to go management by wandering around and stopwatches and try to interview hundreds of people. And what I saw that first day when you and I met, July 30, exactly 10 months ago today, July 31st of 2023, was this elegant model that showed me in a single day how to extract from people what was happening in their work and to come up with a proposed remedy to the problems that they were having. And to me, I had never seen that done in under 90 days before. And even me doing it in 90 days, people were like, I don't know how you can get it done so fast. So when I'm doing it in 90 days and I'm the speed demon and you're doing it in 24 hours, I had to shut up and listen.
So it's process on crack.
Yes, it is. And I think...
Please do not abuse controlled substances. I'm not promoting that.
But, I have to think, when you created this methodology, did you know it?
It was God-given.
Yeah, right. So talk a little bit about that early on. Like, what was the hunch, when you went into those first couple sessions, and I have pictures of those sessions, I'll post them here on the YouTube. But when you went into those first couple sessions, what were you expecting? And then how different was that from the results that you got?
That's a fascinating question. The most concise answer is I saw the whole session at 3 or 4 in the morning. And everything about it I saw as not a dream, but as, I'm not saying an open vision, but
I know what you mean, yeah.
But I understood it as a gift from God. I would say 80 to 90% of what I should expect. And so I hit those early triages with how do I make sure I enable what I saw? And enabling what I saw was put the right people in the room.
And the right people weren't the people sitting around the table with you and leadership.
The only people you can triage with are those close enough to know how it works, have intimate, practical knowledge of the process, and they are the go-tos that have the informal authority to not be second-guessed.
That's interesting. So you're talking about sort of those, there's a book called Rudolph Factor that talked about the last turnaround of Boeing, because this happened with Boeing one time before with the C-17 project. And the fascinating thing about that story is that management at that time realized that middle management was standing in the way. So the executives at Boeing at that time went out onto the floor with employees and said, from here on out until this is fixed, don't communicate with your managers, communicate with us directly. And within days started to fix the whole entire thing, because the conversation that was happening at the base level of the organization was never making it up. The quality challenges and inspection problems they were having at the front line were never making it up through the filter of management. And they actually called those people on the floor Rudolphs. They actually said, these are the red-nosed reindeers that are going to lead us through the storm. But it can't be Santa that runs the sleigh. You have to have, when you're in the fog, you got to have the flashy nose. And I always loved that analogy that they used. They called those folks in the front line the Rudolphs.
Anytime that you divide work up into specialized stations by any other name, silos, lanes, whatever, right? You're doing so because you have to. It's just a matter of efficiency, all right?
Yeah.
And when you introduce these partitions, again, by any other name, you have to design the work handoff. And a work handoff creates a supplier-customer relationship that has an implied contract. And that implied contract is hand me error-free inputs that I can do what I need to do error-free at referable quality. Okay? So the only difference between a process and a project is one cycle of a process. All a process is a multi-cycling project. So everything we know about project management applies to process management, but we must add in sectional handoff management.
Okay, stop for a second there. I want to sectional. So say that one more time, because if we break this down, we talk about actions and results. So actions equate to results.
Right.
In a series of results.
At some point, there's a boundary.
Yeah.
Anytime a result is a handoff to another section or silo, pick your noun, that's an implied contract, which means you have to deliver what you promise. And at low volume, it can be informal because the handoff is relational.
Yeah.
Right?
At high volume, it cannot.
At high volume, it's not relational. It's crank them out. And at that point, you have to add structure and measuring. And did I deliver this? Did every handoff meet a promise by any other noun? Which means I got to stick a meter into it and say, okay.
To measure it, yeah.
Did it meet standards? Right? So from those handoffs come your process measurement approach. Now, if you hand off to an entity outside of your control, which could be another internal organization, specifically a cost center, or you hand over to an external supplier or an outsourcee, that contract has to be extremely tight, including how will the subsequent work be returned into the process. That's why in the triage, in the AR mapping, we always know where the externals are, because how you fix those pain points is an order of magnitude oftentimes more difficult than fixing something internally.
Oh, absolutely. Because when it's outside of your control, when those people when you don't have authority over them,
all you have is an SLA that's enforceable.
Yeah.
And if you can't enforce the SLA, then
if you're not Walmart, it's hard to enforce an SLA.
And when you receive that work product back into your process, you've got to put in a formal receiving process that includes a quality control check. And that's a get over it.
Rosie, this is good stuff.
And you understand that when you're at low volume, you can do that informally.
Yeah.
But you're just a craftsman shop for all practical purposes. But you graduate into what we call true production work, that informality will kill you. And it's traumatizing to human relationships who have been wonderful and got along great informally, but that relationship gets outgrown by volume. That's why they say that success kills more companies than failure, because they're not structured for the volume.
Boy, is that good.
Volume changes everything.
It really does, right?
If everything works correctly from opportunity to cash, right?
Yeah, you're infinite. You can go anywhere.
And you're going to add volume.
Yeah.
In other words, the success of the lead to cash process, which the whole point, right, is it'll break it. You have to have a culture that says, go break it.
Yeah.
I mean, break it intentionally.
Sure.
Right? Or I'm going to rephrase it. We know that volume will break it. Our response will be cultural and deliberate.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to pay attention to it. But the problem is the situational awareness of what's going on in that lead to cash process is unconsciously functional in the C-suite, because they're getting constant feedback from all over the place, and they're kind of aware of what's going on. And so you have a C-suite that knows what's going on generally, right? But it's gonna be filtered the more they have to delegate, and that filtering is natural and necessary, because a C-suite should be managing by exception, of course.
Yeah.
Because they should have delegated all the authority and resources,
Yeah.
So what we have to do then is create that same original C-suite awareness closer to the work. The only reason that team exists is because you partitioned the work. It was the process that demanded a team. We have to organize that team and teach it to be situationally aware somehow.
Yeah.
It means we got to pull them offline once in a while and have them talk to each other in a very structured way that looks at the process. They look at the process shoulder to shoulder. And so that's what the triaging day is oftentimes the wider the scope, the better, as long as it's a continuous flow, right?
Yeah.
Lead to cache is typical. We've got all the silo or section representatives with all the believables. Okay. So, and when you put them together, you basically say, look, to have this conversation intelligently and focused, we have to begin with that capability goal, saying, make this thing do this physically.
Let me stop you really quick. Did you just call triagers believables?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever, in 10 months, you've never said that before. That is mind blowing to me. That whole
Just
comment.
put the believables in the room. Everybody knows who they are, because they go run into them to go fix crap or to teach somebody or to train somebody informally. So what I was given, and I credit it to God, right, is I saw all of this in a moment. And so what I was trying to do with those original sessions was, and you know how when you have an insight in your sleep or you wake up with an insight, you need to write it down or you're going to lose it, right? It's going to go fuzzy almost instantly. And so I spent those early triages trying to put clothes on that idea that came in naked and gorgeous. Right? I'm not putting a sex to it, of course, but
right, I know what you mean.
It was an idea that needed to have clothes.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the Hebrew word for that's chokhmah, but I don't want to complicate things, obviously. But so that's what we did. Is that we put clothes on this idea, and then their first 2 or 3 triages, and in the process realized we're really a process improvement is really about team development. And that's why it's such a minefield with leadership, especially middle management, because middle managers are team leaders. And some are good and some are less good. And this
Say that again. Process improvement is team, was it team leadership?
Team development, yeah.
Team development. Yeah, interesting.
See, and that's what's so appealing to the C-suite is because, remember, middle managers develop teams and things.
Yeah.
Executives develop team builders. Right? And if you can demonstrate you can build a team, an executive will unconsciously consciously, if they're paying attention, they're going to throw more work at you because you know how to build teams. Yeah. And that's why triaging is so illuminating, because after the triage session, the C-suite sponsor is over the moon because they're seeing that team building. They see that team shoulder to shoulder over a core process, collaboratively, respectfully listening to each other and solving each other's, goal-driven problems.
Hmm.
The host is is a team builder, typically a manager, and they now know what resources to go fetch to give that team what they need to fix what they need to fix. And it
You know,
positions that host, right, to be a super team developer.
it's funny you mentioned this go fetch piece, because I found some old Deming stuff where Deming talked about in World War II what made America really great was the fact that middle management had got all shipped overseas. And executives had no choice but to walk down on the line and stand beside a bunch of women, children, and old fat guys that didn't know what they were doing and have to hear from them. And there's a story.
American Enterprise Institute published a book recently in the last
Ah,
few years about the 5, what they were called dollar a year men that basically won World War II.
huh.
I'll try to.
Yeah, I'll look for it. That sounds fascinating. But it was interesting because some of the things that executives found were things like watching women try to tighten bolts and realize that the wrenches were too big because their hands were smaller. So just really simple things. And this whole concept.
That's, of course, the Japanese and Deming. That's really where Kaizen
It all came from there, yeah.
found
And it was funny because what the executives became were these go fetch boys, where all they did was women and old men and children told them what to go get, and they went and got it because it made the line work better.
If you were to tell the sponsor what's the one thing to listen for, to look for, to know that you had a successful triage, that one thing is that the C-suite is presented with only one answer, a question that only gives them one answer, and that one answer is the C-suite must say, "What do you need?" In other words, the presentation of the pain point and its candidate solution is so succinct and clear and credible. Remember, because the Believables are bringing it to you, that all the sponsor is left to say is, "What do you need?" And so flip that around, flip the little telescope around, look through the other lens.
Sure.
And the triager lens is, you have your executive where you want them when all they can tell you is, "What do you need?" That's your objective, is to put your stakeholder responsible leader in a position where all they can tell you is, "What do you need?" That is a hyper functioning team. And the only way to get that is hit all those triaging notes that's designed into the session.
So, Rosie, I want to talk about one other thing, because right before we closed out that point, you talked about the Believables standing shoulder to shoulder. And I want to tell you a quick story because it really blew me away when I heard this last week. And I heard it from a facilitator that was repeating to me what they had seen in one of their first workshops. And they said that it reminded them of something that they believed that Peter Senge had said, who wrote The Fifth Dimension and a couple other really powerful books. But I'm going to share my screen with you real quick because I want you to see this. But essentially what Senge was credited with saying was that there was a moment in human history where, we lived in caves, and anytime we experienced a tiger out in the real world, it was a terrifying event. Like, it was, whoever is the slowest runner is dead. I mean, that's just the way it worked, right? Until one day, by the light of the fire in the cave, someone took a piece of charcoal and drew a tiger on the cave wall. And in that moment of doing that, all of a sudden, everybody in the cave could stand shoulder to shoulder. And for the first time ever, they could abstract. And you could look at the tiger and you could say, okay, that's the bitey part, right? And it's like, Og is really good with big stones and smashing things. So if we put him on this ledge, I'm good with the pokey sticks. Job's the best runner.
You can see where this is going.
Yeah. And for the first time ever, we could abstract. And what Sengi is credited with saying is he said, if you look at all cave paintings, all of the earliest, they all were abstracting on how to solve problems. And they all had to be done shoulder to shoulder. He's like, we look at it and think of it as art. He goes, no, no, no. It's dad cave person standing there with a stick saying to son, that's the tiger. This is the deer. Here's where the pass is. You have sharp, pointy stick, and everybody abstracting this thing out.
Yeah.
And it was cool because what this facilitator said was that in watching triage happen, it is like this moment in human evolution that you can look back and see by the light of the cave, everybody standing there. And it's really cool because I had this happen with me the other day, Rosie. I rolled out a map for 80 people at a company. And I said, we're going to take a 5-minute break for everybody to go up and walk through the map. And I said, if you were a triager, please do a process walk with the folks up at the wall and share with them this. So for 25 minutes, this went on. And the volume in the room was so loud. Even the CEO said to me, he's like, I don't think I've ever heard my people talk this much. And at one point I captured a picture. There's like 6 people all pointing to different things on the map at the same time. And everybody's very animated. And there's like side conversations happening and they're looking at parts in the map. And I was just like, it sort of blew me away to think about this idea that we could abstract from that data. You cannot abstract from a financial statement, not well. You can't abstract from an SOP well. But boy, when you throw something up on the wall, it's really easy to know what's the jaggy, bitey parts and what are the soft, fleshy parts that you can dig your spear into. And it really, that shoulder to shoulder piece. And it's funny because I had somebody the other day say, you've got to figure out a way to do this online. And I said, I don't know. I'm not convinced that this works online because you gotta be able to stand there together with the stick and point at the wall and say, here's what's happening. And for other people to be able to abstract that and relate to it. So I just wanted to bring that up before we start talking about standing at the wall side by side, because this sort of kept me awake at night for a couple nights thinking about how impactful that is.
There are 2 reasons why you really can't do a triage online and duplicate the effectiveness.
Yeah.
Anytime you're looking at someone face to face, you're in a negotiation posture.
That's right.
Your limbic system is one step away from fight, flight, or freeze. And when you look at a Zoom call in gallery mode, the limbic system is about ready to run away. Because it's surrounded by people in a threat negotiation posture. You can't build teams with it. What you need to do is put them in change their limbic orientation and put them shoulder to shoulder, looking at something that is non-threatening, like a map that they created and that they can change.
Well, listen, the tiger out on the plains is dangerous. The tiger painted on the wall, I don't have to be afraid of that. Right? We can abstract and we can stand shoulder to shoulder. It's that same thing. When I have to look it in the face, it's a little bit more dangerous.
And you notice that one of the most, like I said, everything in that triage experience, that encounter, is all designed for building teams.
Yeah.
And that's why the agenda is so hyper structured.
It really is. I mean, and listen, we've been working on this for a while, right? When I got to just do a little side note. You know, anytime I'm an entrepreneur, so anytime I adopt anybody else's idea, anytime I buy anything, I'm always like, how do I incorporate this into the bigger picture? Yeah. It is so bulletproof. You did this a couple thousand times, right? Yeah. I mean, it's so bulletproof.
Over 1,000 teams, and
I can do it. I can make it better before, and I can make it better after. I have not found a way to improve upon what is in the middle there.
But you will. Nope, you will.
Well, I mean, at some point, but you've got to get to that point where you can. It's repeatable so many times that you can find these. There's no big change that I feel that can ever really happen. I feel like it's pretty perfected.
Well, again, it's designed for. Remember, it's very, very hard for any business to pull their believables offline cross-functionally, because all those unique functions have their own cost centers and their own
Mhm.
scorecard.
Yep.
And so when you propose that you have a get together, right, a cross-functional, cross-cost center team get together, all of the owners of those resources have an implicit agreement that we're gonna work together as well. So the deeper the org chart, the more fractured the cost and resource allocation nature of that company, right?
Yeah.
You pretty much have to stick to a specific product or service to be able to do triaging,
Yeah.
right? Because there is a coherent need for that team to be talking to each other. But
Mm.
but all that to say that in say Vistage size companies, the say 20 to 100 million, typically you can triage pretty easily in those size companies, typically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what we've found too. I mean, that's why Vistage is such a great resource because they've brought together, the greatest peer advisory group in the world of all of those people, right?
Yeah.
And they are all perspective seekers, which is what I appreciate. I've gone and given speeches, like keynotes and those kind of things, and you get the naysayers, but that come up and say, "Oh, this isn't going to work," and blah blah blah. But at Vistage, you don't get that. You get people that say, "You know what? I don't think it works perfectly for me, but this element I can take out of it and I can bring into my business and
Now
improve things."
remember, Vistage is a mix of types of companies, and not all types of companies have enough process volume to demand a team be situationally aware of each other,
That's very true. It's
right?
really true. Yeah.
The less situationally aware a team needs to be of each other's members, right, the less process discipline you require,
Mm. Yeah.
right?
That's
And
a
that's
really good
more
point.
organic to the type of industry.
Let's talk for a couple minutes. I mean, we've talked about mapping in the past, so I don't want to get too deep into that, but let's talk about um, Six Sigma, because I mentioned this earlier, and sometimes Six Sigma teams can feel a little bit, they feel a little challenged by this. They're like, you're trying to simplify this a little bit too much. And then they usually come around. They usually go, wow, you simplified this just the perfect amount to get my foot in the door to do more, high quality, work on process.
Use triaging as the gun to point your Six Sigma rifle.
Right. Because if you find a process that has a lot of pain in it and that pain needs to be resolved, that means there's going to be a lot of change in that process. You need to bring some statistical control back to that process. And all of that plays in perfectly
Now,
with Six
remember,
Sigma
Six
methodology.
Sigma has a threshold of applicability and practicality. And that
Hmm.
threshold is a certain amount of volume, and it depends upon obviously what the volume is,
Hmm.
right? But Six Sigma is one error per how many?
1 million.
So if they're not cycling a million cycles,
Ah.
what does Six Sigma actually mean?
That's the simplest way I've ever heard to explain who needs Six Sigma and who doesn't. If you aren't cycling at least 1 million times, there's no
So in
need.
other words, if you're not doing a million cycles, Six Sigma is theoretically,
Impossible.
practically out of reach in the short term
Yeah.
because you have to accumulate a million cycles to calculate it. But at the same time, most manufacturing or what we call high precision work processes, they can't handle one error per thousand.
No.
And that's Sigma what?
Oh my goodness. What would that be? 1 per 1,000. I don't even know.
Sigma 3?
Yeah, probably 3. Yeah,
Or
1 per 1,000. Yeah.
okay, if one error per thousand is inexcusable, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of companies that need
Falling.
the
Yeah.
discipline of Six Sigma, like upper and lower control limits,
Sure.
right? Yada yada, all of the Six Sigma body of knowledge. But where do you point that expensive work?
Yeah. This is the gun
Triage, right? All you have to do is find a, a big
that
sitting there in the middle of a high volume or a high precision process, and And the believables, right, the triagers handed it to you, saying, here.
Yeah.
How many Six Sigma practitioners have
Oh,
that kind of intimate acceptance when they come in to help?
none. There's
Time,
never been one.
whatever you measure is going to flunk me and it's going to put me in a bad light.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to. I'm not going to go out of my way to collaborate with you, right? You get into you got to be really careful with. Oh, we're from Six Sigma and we're here to help,
Yeah, it's the old Ronald Reagan. I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
right? Whereas if it comes out of a triage and say, you know what, we looked at your
Yeah.
pain point and it passes the Six Sigma discipline approach, we would like the believable that is at the heart of, is located, in this space. We would like to let them be a team member and collaborate with them with Six Sigma skills because they're really the change agent and we're to support them. All right. And you build a team that it's kind of like in the Army, we said you never leave home without your artillery and your medics.
Yeah.
You never cross the RP, the release point into the battlefield.
Hmm.
You always know where your artillery and your medics are. Okay. I mean,
Hmm.
they're dialed into your radio presets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, same thing, right? If I got a process that involves precision work at sufficient volume, I am not going anywhere without some Six Sigma artillery. But I'm going to
Yeah.
use a triage to target them.
That's your medic. Dang, that's so good.
You
You
see
know
that?
what? How has it been 10 months and you never told me any of this stuff?
Well, because I work for a big corp, and I used to watch early on it was Anderson until they blew Enron up and blew themselves up.
Yep.
Then they rebranded Accenture or whatever, and Deloitte and Ernst and
Yeah.
Young.
Yeah.
All those out of college road
Oh
warriors
yeah.
men who got slaughtered, and the account managers, provided plausible dime. I almost sound like I'm Dilbert jaded. I apologize. But what we found was with triaging, we were able to say, you know what, we need to spend some expensive talent in here helping this team. And they were grateful because they had control over the conversation. The believables understood that it was their own pain points, their own bigs that they located that the sponsor says, you asked me what I think you need. I think you need some support with some big analytical guns, and we're going to detail those to you on our nickel. So it's not coming out of your cost center. We're going to put some Six Sigma people in there.
Yeah.
And it usually worked out.
That's great.
Of course,
All
the
right.
Six Sigma folks had a blast because they
Oh
got
yeah.
believables.
Well,
Because if
right. And
they can't work with the believables, their work product's going to suck.
well, right, because it's all guessing, and it's when you hear it from the horse's mouth, it makes it a lot easier to determine if it's real or if it's not real. So let's talk about results here in the last few minutes. Um, you've done this a lot, right? So and we've talked about the emotional aspect of this. Sometimes the believables triagers become very emotional in these sessions because we've even heard it. Hey, I've been working here 20 years. Nobody's ever asked me what was going on. And I know what it is. So you get some of that. You get a lot of executives that get excited about that list because that list, at least from the lists that we've been seeing, these are not massively difficult problems to solve for the most part. These aren't enterprise software. These aren't complete total rebrands. These aren't, $1 million problems. These are problems that can be resolved with the resources on hand, or maybe a little bit, a little bit of attention time and a little bit of money focused on them. But tell us a little bit about results. You've done this a lot. What have you seen from companies that have been successful, and what have they experienced, and what have they gotten out of it?
A lot of process fixes, all right, actually improving things is improving the team situational awareness
Hmm.
and their ability to communicate with each other up and down the line, which doesn't take a lot of money.
It's their eyes are already there. You're already paying for the eyes and hands to be there. Now
Right.
you've just engaged the brain.
And by
That's the difference. Head up.
and by giving them situational awareness of each other, which is again, it's unconscious and organic in the C-suite, but it's not unconscious and it's not organic down in the team space because you have all these partitions.
Yeah.
So you have to we talk about flatten the organization. What we really mean is we need a situationally aware front line. So we have to pay them. We've got to use 1099 or W-2 labor, whatever
Yeah.
we're doing work with, to pull them offline and let them be situationally aware.
Can't see the forest for all the trees.
That's where the results come from situational awareness. And that's why we've said all along that if a team can see it, a team can generally fix it. But one person won't very rarely sees it all because they don't have the physical capability to see it. Now, sometimes a manager will see it because they're walking the line forward and backwards, et cetera, up and down. And they might be really good at it, and there's a hat tip. But at some point, a team can outthink a manager. And you talk about enablers.
Yeah.
One of the first questions I would always ask a client is, do you have anything that resembles what we would call in triaging a capability goal?
Yeah.
The process capability goal. The closest off-the-shelf goal statements I've ever seen are in EOS shops when they really did the VTO correctly. But that was the only place I saw it. But that VTO was not really understood by the team holistically. And so when we talked about that capability goal, first thing after lunch during the triage, after mapping, that was always illuminating. Because when we said the only pain point, and then when you triage and you ensure every pain point inhibits that goal, you're teaching that team to focus on what matters. And that's why it's the C-suite, the executive sponsor, can trust every single candidate solution that comes out of the triage, because it's all been proofed against the physical behavior goal that will deliver the big number. It's just bolted in tight.
Rosie, this was great. And I have to say, I now have 10 new things that I've never heard from you before, which means we need to record again in a couple of weeks, because every time we do this, I ask, it's great because we're not talking business and I'm just asking questions. And it's ever since 10 months ago when we met, the first 3 or 4 months, I'm trying to figure out, is this a business I want to acquire? How does this work in with mine? Now we're sort of in that relaxed, knowledge transfer conversation that's really helpful. But I do want to give you a challenge, and that is, I want to give it to all the listeners on this. There is an amazing movie that came out last summer called Flaming Hot, and it is the story of how Flaming Hot Cheetos came about. And this story is the perfect picture of what triage is and what it does. And just very quickly to give you the summary, Rosie, is Frito-Lay in the 90s was really struggling. They were closing plants, and the CEO did a video that they played in the break rooms. And that in that video, he explained the problem, and he said, look, maybe somebody out there on the front line has an idea that can save the company. And if you do, call me. And a Mexican immigrant that was a gangbanger, former drug dealer that had gotten a job, cleaned up his act and had kids, gotten a job as a janitor at Frito-Lay, had an idea to make a spicy chip that would serve the Latino market. And not only did he call the CEO, he actually went out, did the market research, created the slurry, worked with the engineers at Frito-Lay, figured out how to attach it to the chip, and then called the CEO of Frito-Lay and said, I have the solution that solves all of our problems, pitched it, got it put into production. He got promoted to a senior executive in the organization, and he just retired a couple of years ago. A janitor, a former gangbanger. He had the idea at the front line of the organization, but no one had ever asked. And all it took was somebody asking. And he was like, oh, if that's all I need to do is just think like a CEO, I can do that. And he came up with this innovative solution. So I've probably watched that movie 3 times. And every time I watch it, gives me the same warm feeling that I get when I do triage, because people are getting their voices heard, and people are helping create solve the problems that are afflicting them on a daily basis. And the reality was, this guy just didn't want to lose his job, and that's why he did it. And he created $1 billion industry in the byproduct. So that's my challenge. Watch Flaming Hot. I think it's on Hulu and all the streaming platforms, but it's such a great, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it later, because I think you'll laugh a lot about it. You've probably seen this happen. I
told the late 4-star General Alexander Haig a joke when I was a second lieutenant, and ended up being a general's aide a month later, or 2 months later.
Right? Sometimes you don't know what people have in their heads.
Yeah, well, let me tell you that I've lived that moment.
Yeah.
And trust me, you don't want to be a general's aide as a second lieutenant, but that's another lie. That's ancient history when I was young and immortal.
Right. That's great. Rosie, as always, thank you for being here today. And thank you all for joining us on the Process Fixer. Until next time.
You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Process Fixer. Help you see the bigger picture. Derrick Maines is the elixir, cut and waste away like scissor. Woo! Got a problem, he can solve it. He's an expert with the process, so for sure you'll see a profit. Bottom line profit. Analyze the work your people doing every day. Expose the inefficiencies getting in the way. Advise you how to automate, outsource, abbreviate, eliminate, innovate. Now there's more food up on your dinner plate.